I was losing our baby. My husband left me bleeding on the floor to comfort his stepsister. Your screaming scared her, he said. I called him later, demanding answers. He admitted they were lovers and then asked me, so, are we still good? Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all started so perfectly, you know? The way you read about in books or see in the good kinds of movies. I met Greg, when I was 28. He was the kind of man who seemed solid, dependable. He worked as a project manager for a construction firm, and he had kind eyes and a laugh that made you want to laugh right along with him. After a string of disappointing dates with men who couldn't hold a conversation or were still emotionally living in their college fraternity, Greg felt like a breath of fresh, clean air. He felt like an adult. He felt like coming home. Our courtship was sweet and beautifully uncomplicated. We spent our weekends exploring little towns upstate, hiking trails that were probably too ambitious for me, and trying out new recipes in his tiny apartment kitchen, often ending in smoke alarms and laughter. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. He spoke of wanting a family, a house with a big yard, a life of comfortable, happy stability. It was everything I wanted, too. After 2 years, he proposed on a quiet Tuesday night in our own living room, with our favorite song playing, and it was the easiest yes of my life. Our wedding was a simple, lovely affair in my parents' backyard. We said our vows under an old oak tree draped in string lights, surrounded by the people we loved most. For 4 years, our life together was just that, good. It was predictable in the best way. We worked, we came home, we made dinner, we watched TV. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared dreams. We were slowly building a savings account, talking seriously about what it would take to get a bigger place. We were a team, laying the bricks for our future, one happy, ordinary day at a time. The final, most important brick fell into place on a rainy Tuesday morning when I saw 2 pink lines appear on a pregnancy test. The joy was a physical thing, a warm, bubbling feeling that expanded in my chest until I felt like I was floating. I couldn't just tell him. I had to make it special. I wrapped the test in tissue paper, tied a ribbon around it, and put it in a little gift box I had saved. That evening, when Greg came home from work, tired and damp from the rain, I handed it to him. "What's this for?" he asked, a puzzled smile on his face. "Just because," I said, my own heart hammering against my ribs. He opened it carefully. He stared at the test for a long moment, his brow furrowed in confusion. And then, his eyes widened. A slow, wonderful smile spread across his face, a look of pure, unadulterated joy. "Are you serious?" he whispered. I just nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. He let out a whoop of laughter, lifting me off the ground and spinning me around in the middle of our kitchen. "We're having a baby," he shouted. "We're going to be parents." That night, we ordered pizza and stayed up until 2 in the morning, brainstorming names, debating the merits of cloth versus disposable diapers, and imagining every detail of the little life that was now growing inside me. We were in this together. Or so I thought. The first hint of a shadow in that perfect picture was Valerie. Valerie was Greg's stepsister. His father had remarried a woman with a daughter when Greg was already away at college, so they hadn't grown up under the same roof. She was a few years younger than him, and he always spoke of her with a kind of detached, protective affection. I'd met her maybe a half-dozen times at Thanksgiving or Christmas. She was fine. Quiet, pretty in a mousy sort of way, and she always seemed a little intimidated by me, which I found odd. I never gave her much thought. She was just a part of Greg's extended family, a minor character in the story of our life. But after I got pregnant, her role began to shift. It was subtle at first, so small I barely noticed. Her name just started appearing on his phone more and more. We'd be sitting on the couch after dinner, and his phone would buzz on the coffee table. Valerie. He would immediately pick it up, his thumbs flying across the screen, a small, private smile on his face. Everything okay with Val? I'd ask, trying to sound casual. Oh, yeah, just the usual, he'd say, not looking up. Drama with her roommate again. You know how it is. I didn't, actually. I barely knew her. But I let it go. Then came the late-night phone calls. They were never when I was awake and in the room. It was always after we'd gone to bed. I'd stir at midnight or 1 in the morning, reaching for him, only to find the space beside me cold. I'd get up, my heart doing a strange little flutter, and find him in the living room, sitting in the dark, his voice a low, intimate murmur into the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone. It was the soft, soothing voice he used with me when I was upset. The first time, I walked out, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Honey? Who are you talking to? It's so late. He jumped, startled, and ended the call abruptly. Oh. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. It was just Valerie. She had a really bad day at work and needed to vent. A bad day at midnight? It felt strange. But I was pregnant, my hormones were a mess, and the last thing I wanted to be was the nagging, suspicious wife. I told myself I was being paranoid. He loved me. We were having a baby. That was real. But it kept happening. 2, sometimes 3 times a week, I'd wake up to an empty bed and the sound of his hushed whispers from the other room. It began to feel less like a brother comforting a sister and more like a secret. A shared world between them that I wasn't invited into. The unease began to settle deep in my stomach, a cold, heavy knot that no amount of rationalization could untie. As the weeks turned into the second trimester and my belly began to swell into a gentle, unmistakable curve, Valerie's presence in our lives intensified. It was no longer confined to the digital world of texts and late-night calls, she started physically showing up. Unannounced. I'd be in the middle of my afternoon nap, the one thing that got me through the exhaustion of the first trimester, and the doorbell would ring, jolting me awake. It was always her. Oh, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by, she'd chirp, a bright, brittle smile on her face. She would breeze past me before I could even properly say hello, her eyes scanning the apartment, calling out, Greggy. You home? Greg, of course, was always thrilled. His whole demeanor would change. His face would light up in a way that, if I'm being honest with myself, it hadn't for me in a while. Val. What a surprise, he'd say, giving her a hug that lasted just a little too long. They would settle on the couch, their knees almost touching, and talk for hours. They'd reminisce about family vacations I'd never been on, laugh at inside jokes I didn't understand, and discuss the intricacies of their family drama in a coded language that left me completely on the outside. I would try to participate. I'd ask questions, try to find an entry point into their closed-off world, but the conversation would always falter. They'd give me a polite, brief answer before turning back to each other, seamlessly picking up where they left off. After a few failed attempts, I'd usually just mumble an excuse about needing to rest and retreat to our bedroom, closing the door on the sound of their easy, intimate laughter. I felt like a guest in my own home. The real turning point, the moment my quiet unease morphed into a blaring, 5-alarm fire, was the day she brought over the box. It was a dusty, water-stained cardboard box that looked like it had been sitting in a damp garage for a decade. Look what I found when I was helping Mom clean out the attic, Greggy, she announced, plopping it down with a thud right in the middle of our living room floor. Greggy. The nickname grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. The box was a shrine to their shared history. Old, faded photos of them as awkward teenagers at some beachside rental house. Ticket stubs from a concert they'd gone to in high school. A silly, plastic trophy from a mini-golf game they'd won. It was a time capsule of their life together, a life that had existed long before me. Greg was over the moon. He sifted through the items like a kid on Christmas morning. "Oh my God, I can't believe you found this," he'd exclaim, holding up a worn-out t-shirt. And they'd launch into another long, detailed story that had no room for me. I tried to be gracious. I smiled and said things like, "That's so sweet, and what a great memory." But inside, I was churning. This wasn't a sweet gesture. This was a power play. This was Valerie, planting her flag in the middle of my living room, in the middle of my marriage. She was showing me, in no uncertain terms, that she had a history, a bond, a claim on my husband that I could never touch. The box sat there. 4 days. It became a permanent fixture, an ugly brown monument to my exclusion. I asked Greg, politely at first, "Honey, could we find a place for the box?" "It's right in the main walkway." Yeah, I'll get to it," he'd say, but he never did. Finally, after nearly a week of having to carefully navigate around it, I'd had enough. Valerie was over, yet again, and I decided to be direct. "Greg," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I need you to move that box. I'm pregnant, I can barely see my feet as it is, and I'm going to break my neck on it. Can we please just put it in a closet?" Valerie's face crumpled as if I had just slapped her. Her eyes instantly welled up with crocodile tears. "I'm so sorry, Audra," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to be a bother. I thought it would be nice for Greg to have those things around, to remember." And Greg, my husband, the man who was supposed to be on my team, turned on me. His voice was sharp with annoyance. "Audra, what is your problem?" She was just trying to do something nice. "Honestly, you've been so oversensitive lately. It must be the pregnancy hormones." The accusation hung in the air, stunning me into silence. He was using our baby, the physical manifestation of our love, as a weapon against me. He was siding with her, validating her manipulative tears, and dismissing my completely reasonable request as hormonal hysteria. I looked from his frustrated face to Valerie's, where I caught the briefest flicker of a triumphant smirk before she replaced it with a look of doe-eyed innocence. "I just wanted to help Greg remember who he was," she said quietly, looking at me, "before he got all tied down." It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of war. I was 14 weeks pregnant. 14 weeks. We had just had an appointment the week before, one of the good ones. We saw the heartbeat on the ultrasound, a tiny, impossibly fast flicker of light on the grainy screen. The doctor had smiled and said everything looked perfect. It was real. Our baby was real, a tiny person with a beating heart, growing safely inside me. The constant exhaustion and nausea of the first trimester were finally starting to fade, and in their place was a blossoming excitement. I'd spend my afternoons in the spare room that was going to be the nursery. It was still empty, save for a can of pale yellow paint and a few books on baby names, but I would sit on the floor, my hand on my still small belly, and dream. I'd imagine reading bedtime stories in a rocking chair, the smell of baby powder, the warmth of a tiny body curled against mine. The day it happened, the house was a disaster. Not my disaster. Valerie's. That curse box was still there, but now its contents had migrated, spilling out across the living room rug like a deliberate trap. Old photo albums with sharp corners, dusty trinkets, and piles of old letters created a treacherous obstacle course between the kitchen and the couch. She had brought over more things since the box incident: 2 lamps, a stack of books, another box of winter clothes she needed to store, claiming her landlord was being difficult. Our small 2-bedroom house was starting to feel less like our home and more like her personal, free-of-charge storage unit. I had tried to talk to Greg about it again that very morning over breakfast. "Honey, this is getting out of hand," I'd said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "The house is a mess. I can't live like this. It's a safety hazard, especially for me right now." He had sighed, that same tired, annoyed sigh he now reserved just for me. "Audra, I told you, I will handle it. Just give her a little time. She's going through a lot." He made it sound like I was the villain, like my desire to not live in a cluttered death trap was a personal attack on his precious stepsister. That afternoon, I was walking from the kitchen back to the living room, a tall glass of ice water in my hand. I was tired, one of those deep, pregnancy-related bone weariness that settled in around 3 p.m. My back ached, and my mind was a million miles away, trying to decide what to make for dinner that wouldn't make me feel sick. I wasn't paying close enough attention to the minefield on the floor. My foot, clad in a fuzzy slipper, caught on the sharp corner of a heavy, leather-bound photo album. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing down. I remember the sensation of my ankle twisting, the sickening feeling of losing my balance. The glass of ice water slipped from my hand, arcing through the air. My arms flailed wildly, desperately searching for something to grab onto, but there was nothing but empty space. I went down. Hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I landed directly, horribly, on my stomach. The first thing I felt was a sharp, blinding pain that seemed to explode from my core and radiate through my entire body. The second thing, a split second later, was a wave of pure, ice-cold terror that was somehow even worse than the pain. My baby. My mind didn't just think it, it screamed it. My baby. I lay there on the floor for a moment, gasping for air, the world a blurry mess around me. And then my vision cleared, and I saw her. Valerie. She had been sitting on our couch, scrolling on her phone. She was looking right at me. And her face, it was utterly, chillingly blank. There was no concern. No shock. No panic. She didn't move. She didn't say a word. She just watched me, her expression unreadable, as I lay crumpled on the floor. A cramp, sharp and vicious, seized my abdomen. It was a pain unlike anything I had ever felt before. I knew, with a gut-deep certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something was terribly, terribly wrong. With a groan, I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees, my whole body trembling. Greg! I screamed his name. He was out in the garage, sanding a piece of furniture. Greg, help me! The cramping intensified, a brutal, twisting sensation. I felt a horrifying, warm gush between my legs. I stumbled towards the bathroom, my vision tunneling, my legs threatening to give out from under me. I knew what was happening. My body knew. And as I collapsed onto the cold tile floor of the bathroom, the only thought in my head was a desperate, repeating prayer from a place beyond thought. Please, no. Please, no. Please, no. The world shrank to the 4 white-tiled walls of our bathroom. The pain was unbelievable, a relentless tide that pulled me under, released me just long enough to gasp for air, and then dragged me down again. Each wave was stronger, more vicious than the last. It was a primal, tearing pain that left me breathless and shaking, my body locked in a battle I couldn't win. I was losing my baby. I was losing our dream. And I was bleeding. So much. The pristine white tiles of our bathroom floor, the ones we had picked out together at the home improvement store, were turning a nightmarish shade of crimson. Through the fog of pain and terror, my only coherent thought was Greg. I needed him. I needed my husband. I had dropped my phone in the hallway, but I could see it lying just outside the door. I crawled, my body screaming in protest, and snatched it. My fingers were slick with sweat and trembling so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. He must have left his phone in the house while he was in the garage. Greg! I screamed his name until my throat felt like it was tearing. Greg, I'm in the bathroom. I need you. Something's wrong. I heard a noise from the garage, the sound of the sander powering down. I heard his footsteps, heavy and slow, coming down the hall. The bathroom door, which I had left ajar, creaked open. He stood there, framed in the doorway, and for a single, desperate second, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in my chest. He was here. He would take over. He would hold me, call an ambulance, tell me everything was going to be okay. But then I saw his face. It wasn't the face of a loving husband seeing his wife in the middle of a medical emergency. There was no panic, no fear, no compassionate concern. He looked, put out. Annoyed. He glanced from my face, pale and tear-streaked, down to the floor, to the blood that was spreading around me. His lip curled in a slight expression of disgust. "Oh, wow," he said, his voice completely flat. This is going to be a lot to clean up. I'm not even sure where to start." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. A lot to clean up? That's what he saw. Not his wife, bleeding on the floor, losing their child. He saw a mess. A chore. An inconvenience that was going to ruin his afternoon. "Greg, please," I sobbed, the sound ripping from my throat. I reached a hand out to him, a desperate, pleading gesture. "Please, help me. It hurts so much. I think I'm losing the baby." He took a physical step back, away from my outstretched hand, as if I were contaminated. "Look, Audra, He glanced over his shoulder, back towards the living room, his eyes darting around nervously. "I have to go check on Valerie. The fall, you're screaming, it really, really scared her. She looks pretty shaken up." My brain couldn't process it. The words were just sounds, meaningless and insane. My mind refused to accept the reality of what he was saying. He was leaving me. He was leaving me, in the middle of a miscarriage, his wife bleeding on the floor, to go check on her. Because she was scared? What? The word was a choked whisper. "Greg, no. Don't go. You can't leave me right now. Stay with me. Please, I need you. I'm scared." He wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the hallway behind him, as if I were too grotesque to look at. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice distant and cold. "I just need to make sure she's okay. You know how she is. She gets really triggered by stuff like this." And then he turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps receding down the hall was the cruelest sound I had ever heard. He left me there. On the floor. Alone. The pain in my body, as immense as it was nothing compared to the shattering, absolute agony in my heart. He had chosen her. In the single most traumatic, terrifying moment of my life, he had looked at my suffering, he had looked at her performance of distress, and he had chosen her. The sound that escaped my lips wasn't a cry. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of something inside me breaking. Something I knew, with a horrifying certainty, could never, ever be fixed. I don't know how long I lay on that cold bathroom floor. Time ceased to exist in any meaningful way. There was only the relentless rhythm of the pain, the sight of the blood, and the deafening silence of the house where my husband's comforting voice should have been. Every wave of cramps was a brutal, physical reminder of what I was losing, of the life that was slipping away. At one point, in a moment of visceral, unforgettable horror, I held the remains of our baby in my hands. Our tiny, perfect, wished-for child. And I was completely, devastatingly alone. My phone was still clutched in my hand, a useless lifeline. I started texting him, my thumbs moving clumsily, my vision blurred by tears. It was a desperate, frantic stream of consciousness. "Greg, please come back. I need you. Please don't leave me alone. It's happening. I'm losing the baby. I'm scared. Please just come hold me. Where are you?" The little blue check marks appeared. The messages were marked as read. He was seeing them. He was sitting on the couch, not 20 feet away, reading my pleas for help, and he was actively, consciously ignoring them. The cruelty of it was a physical thing, a separate pain that coiled in my gut, a knife twisting in a wound that was already impossibly deep. After what felt like an eternity, the clock on my phone told me it had been 32 minutes, he finally reappeared in the doorway. I was slumped against the cool porcelain of the bathtub, my body trembling with weakness and shock. I was anemic to begin with, and the blood loss was making me dizzy, the edges of my vision going gray and fuzzy. I couldn't have stood up if I tried. He wasn't empty-handed. He was holding a glass of water. For a wild, pathetic moment, I thought it was for me. But then I saw the faint lipstick smudge on the rim. It was Valerie's. He had gotten her a glass of water while I was in here, bleeding. Is it over?" he asked, his voice still holding that same bizarre, detached quality. As if he were asking about a thunderstorm. I couldn't find the words. I just shook my head, a fresh wave of tears streaming down my face. "Okay, well," he said, shifting his weight awkwardly from one foot to the other. "Valerie is really upset. She feels so guilty about leaving that box out, she thinks this is all her fault. I keep telling her it wasn't, that accidents happen, but she's just inconsolable. I really need to stay with her, Audra. She's not in a good place." He was making excuses for her. He was actively managing her feigned emotions while I was living through a real-life nightmare. The rage that surged through me was so potent it momentarily eclipsed the pain. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to hurt him the way he was so casually and completely hurting me. But I didn't have the strength. "I need pads," I whispered, my voice hoarse and barely audible. "The big ones. The overnight ones. And I need you to stay." He sighed. He actually let out a long, put-upon sigh, as if I had just asked him to single-handedly build a new house. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice laced with annoyance. "I'll go to the store. But I have to get back quickly. Valerie needs me. She said it's urgent." Urgent. Helping his stepsister with her manufactured guilt trip was urgent. His wife, miscarrying their child, was a chore. He left again. He just turned and walked away. I watched him go, and I felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. Using the bathtub for support, I managed to pull myself to my feet. I shed my ruined clothes, dropping them in a heap on the floor. I turned on the shower as hot as I could stand it and just sat on the floor of the tub, letting the scalding water run over me, mingling with the blood. I was trying to wash it all away. The pain, the loss, the filth of his betrayal. But it was impossible. It was a stain on my soul. He came back another half an hour later. I heard the bathroom door open. I didn't even look up. He tossed the plastic package of pads onto the bathroom counter. It landed with a soft thud. I heard him hesitate for a second, and then I heard his footsteps recede down the hall. I heard the murmur of his voice, that same soft, comforting tone he had once used on me, now reserved exclusively for her. He was out there, on our couch, with her. Comforting her. While I was in here, alone, surrounded by the wreckage of our family. That was his choice. And in making it, he had burned our entire world to the ground. After the shower, I felt scoured. Physically drained and emotionally hollowed out. I moved with the slow, deliberate care of an old woman, wrapping myself in a towel, cleaning up the worst of the mess with a handful of paper towels. Every movement was a monumental effort. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, dressed in clean sweatpants and one of Greg's old, soft t-shirts that still smelled faintly of him, the house was quiet. Valerie was gone. So was Greg. There was a single, empty glass on the coffee table, a perfect, pinkish smudge of lipstick on the rim. Her glass. The box of their memories was still there, a silent, mocking witness to the destruction of my future. I stumbled into the kitchen, a desperate, gnawing hunger mixing with the nausea. I knew I had to eat something, to replenish my strength. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the can opener to open a simple can of tomato soup. As I stood there at the stove, stirring the soup with a wooden spoon, my phone, which I had left on the counter, buzzed. It was a text from Greg. My heart gave a pathetic, traitorous little flutter of hope. Maybe he's coming home. Maybe he came to his senses. Maybe he's sorry. I wiped my hands and picked it up. The message was short, clinical. Valerie is too distraught to be alone. I'm going to stay at her place tonight to make sure she's okay. That was it. No, I love you. No, I'm so sorry for our loss. No, are you okay? Just a cold, factual statement. He was staying with her. He was choosing to sleep in her apartment, in her bed, while his wife was alone in their home, just hours after losing their child. He hadn't even had the courage to tell me to my face. I sank to the kitchen floor, the wooden spoon clattering out of my hand. The soup on the stove, forgotten, started to bubble and then burn, filling the small kitchen with a bitter, acrid smell that seemed to match the taste in my mouth. I didn't have the energy to get up and turn it off. I just sat there on the cold linoleum, surrounded by the smell of burning, and let the darkness swallow me whole. Eventually, I managed to crawl to the couch. I wrapped myself in a throw blanket and turned on the TV. I flipped through the channels, the colorful images just flickering in front of my eyes, meaningless and loud. A sitcom family laughed around their dinner table. A commercial for life insurance showed a happy couple planning their future. It was all a cruel joke. The silence in the house was a living entity. It was heavy, oppressive, suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, seemed to amplify my solitude. This was our home. The place where we were supposed to bring our baby. We had spent hours debating paint colors for the nursery. Now, the silence from that empty room was the loudest sound of all. Sleep was an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, the horror movie of the day replayed on a loop. The fall. The searing pain. The sight of the blood. Greg's cold, disgusted face. His back as he walked away from me. I saw Valerie's blank stare, the hint of a triumphant smirk on her lips. Was this what she wanted all along? Had she won? It certainly felt like it. She had successfully wormed her way into the heart of my marriage, and in its most vulnerable moment, she had ripped it to shreds. And my husband, my partner, the man who had sworn in front of God and our families to love and protect me, had willingly handed her the knife. Sometime in the deep, dark hours before dawn, a new feeling started to creep in, pushing through the thick, suffocating fog of grief. It was anger. A slow-burning, righteous fury that started as a spark in my gut and began to warm my frozen limbs. This wasn't just a tragedy. This was a betrayal. A grotesque and unforgivable betrayal. It wasn't just that he had failed me, it was that he had actively, consciously chosen to abandon me for someone else. And as the first gray, unforgiving light of morning started to filter through the windows, I knew one thing with absolute, unshakable certainty. I could not stay here. I could not wait for him to come home and feed me some pathetic, watered-down excuse. Whatever we had, it was over. It had died on that bathroom floor, right alongside our baby. The morning brought no relief, only a stark, painful clarity. My body ached with a deep, cavernous emptiness that was more than just physical. I felt weak, dizzy, and more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I checked my phone out of a grim, morbid habit. No new messages. No missed calls. He hadn't bothered to check if I was still alive. That was the final, brutal confirmation I needed. I couldn't do this by myself anymore. My own well of strength was completely dry. With trembling fingers, I scrolled to my contacts and pressed Mom. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice warm and cheerful, a sound from another, happier world. Audra, honey. I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling? The simple kindness in her voice shattered the fragile dam I had built around my emotions. A raw, ugly sob ripped through me, a sound I couldn't control. Mom, I choked out, and then the whole story came pouring out in a torrent of gasps and tears. The fall, the blood, the hospital-worthy pain, the miscarriage, Greg leaving me completely alone to go be with Valerie. I could hear my dad's concerned voice in the background, a low rumble asking what was wrong. My mom's voice changed, the warmth instantly replaced by a steely, protective fury I hadn't heard since I was a child. He did what? She kept saying, her voice getting colder and harder with each detail I shared. He left you alone? While you were... Oh, my God. I didn't have to ask for help. They didn't even let me. Audra, listen to me, my dad said, his voice firm and unwavering through the phone. You are not staying in that house one more second. I'm booking you a flight. Right now. You're coming home. The relief was so immense, so overwhelming, it almost buckled my knees. Someone was coming to save me. Someone was putting me first. I wasn't alone anymore. The next few hours passed in a blur of numb, robotic activity. I moved through the house like a ghost, packing a single suitcase. It was a strange, surreal process. What do you take with you when you're running away from your life? I packed practical things, comfortable clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I packed the few pieces of jewelry that had sentimental value, my grandmother's ring, a necklace my parents gave me for graduation. With shaking hands, I carefully tucked the latest ultrasound photo, the one with the flickering heartbeat, into the pages of a book. I left everything else. I left the furniture we had spent weekends picking out together. I left the half-painted nursery, the can of yellow paint sitting like a tombstone in the corner. I left the wedding photos on the wall, our smiling faces a cruel, mocking lie. Before I left, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we had celebrated our pregnancy, and wrote him a note on a piece of paper from a notepad by the phone. My hand was surprisingly steady. There were no tears, no angry, jagged letters. Just a few, simple, devastating sentences. Greg. I lost our baby yesterday. And somewhere in all of that, I lost you, too. I'm going home to my parents. I don't know when I'll be back, or if I will be. I needed you, and you weren't there. Audra. I walked into our bedroom and placed the note on his pillow, right on the indentation where his head should have been all night. I took one last look around the house that was supposed to be our forever home. It just looked like a house now. The warmth, the love, the magic, it was all gone. My dad had arranged for a car service. The driver was kind and didn't try to make small talk. As I sat in the quiet, dark backseat, watching my neighborhood, my street, my house disappear through the rear window, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt nothing. A vast, empty, quiet nothingness. It was the feeling of survival. I had been through the fire, and I had come out the other side, scorched and broken, but alive. The plane ticket on my phone was a promise. A promise of safety, of comfort, of a place where I would be loved unconditionally. A place that was the complete opposite of the home I was leaving behind. Arriving at my parents' house was like stepping out of a frigid, storm-tossed sea and onto solid, warm land. The moment I walked through the familiar front door, my mom wrapped me in her arms. She held me so tightly, for so long, that I could feel some of her strength seeping into my own exhausted bones. My dad took my suitcase from my hand, his face grim and set with a quiet, righteous fury on my behalf. They didn't bombard me with questions or platitudes. They just took care of me. My mom led me to the couch and tucked a warm blanket around my shoulders. My dad appeared a moment later with a cup of chamomile tea. They put me to bed in my old childhood room, with its floral wallpaper and bookshelf full of teenage novels. Just rest, honey, my mom whispered, kissing my forehead. Don't you worry about a single thing. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept. It was a deep, dreamless, heavy sleep, the kind that only comes after complete and utter exhaustion. The next few days passed in a gentle, healing haze. My parents were my anchors. They created a quiet, safe space for me to just exist. They let me talk when I felt like talking, sitting at the kitchen table with me for hours as I went over the horrible details again and again. And they sat with me in comfortable silence when I didn't, just watching old movies or reading in the same room, their presence a constant, reassuring comfort. My mom insisted I see a doctor, a kind-faced woman she had known for years. The doctor was gentle and thorough. She confirmed that physically, I was recovering, but she looked me in the eye and said, "Audra, the physical part is the easy part. You've been through a significant trauma. Be kind to yourself. The emotional toll will be much harder and will take much longer to heal." She was right. The grief was a physical presence, an ambush predator that would strike without warning. I'd be helping my mom fold laundry, and the sight of a tiny baby sock would send me running to my room, choking on sobs. I'd be watching TV, and a commercial for diapers would come on, and the wound would feel as fresh and raw as it did on that bathroom floor. But through it all, there was a strange and deeply unsettling silence from Greg's end. A full week went by. 7 days. 168 hours. And nothing. Not a single phone call. Not one text message. No emails. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist. He didn't respond to the note I had left. He didn't try to call my parents to find out where I was. He didn't seem to care that his wife had vanished after a medical emergency. My friends started calling me, their voices laced with confusion and concern. "Hey, Audra, is everything okay? We tried calling Greg to see if you guys wanted to get dinner, but his phone goes straight to voicemail." My friend Sarah, who lived just down the street from us, called to say she hadn't seen any lights on at our house for days and his car wasn't in the driveway. "It's like the place is abandoned," she said. The silence was more damning than any angry words or pathetic excuses could have been. It confirmed the horrible truth that had been taking root in my heart. This wasn't a momentary, catastrophic lapse in judgment. This wasn't a mistake he had made in a panic. This was a deliberate, calculated choice. He was with her. He had chosen to be with her, and in order to do that, he had to completely and utterly erase me from his life. I started to think back, my mind now clear from the fog of shock. I replayed every strange interaction, every lame excuse, every late-night call. How had I been so blind? The signs were all there, waving like giant red flags. I had just refused to see them because I loved him. I trusted him. I had believed in the beautiful life we were building, in the sacredness of the future we had planned. The more I thought about it, the more I knew that his excuse about Valerie being shaken up was a flimsy, pathetic lie. A person who is shaken up needs comfort for an evening, maybe a day. They do not require someone to abandon their grieving, miscarrying wife and disappear off the face of the earth with them for an entire week. No, this was something else. This was a cover story. A cover story for something much, much darker. And as the 8th day of silence dawned, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait for him to deign to contact me. I needed answers. But I was also terrified of what those answers would be. On the afternoon of the 8th day, just as I was starting to think he might never contact me again, my phone finally buzzed. It was him. It wasn't a call, of course. He didn't have the courage for that. It was a text message. A single, massive block of text. A novel of self-serving delusions and breathtaking gall. I was in my room, trying to read a book, when the message came through. My heart did a painful, lurching thump. I sat on the edge of my bed, my mom coming in to sit quietly beside me, a silent offer of support. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I read it aloud, my voice flat and monotone, a newscaster reporting on a distant tragedy. "Audra," it began. "I know you're upset. I get it. But you have to try to understand my position here. I had to stay with Valerie this whole week. It was an emergency." My mom let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a snort of derision. I just kept reading. "When you fell, it triggered her. Seriously. It brought back a really traumatic memory for her from her childhood that she's never fully dealt with. She was completely falling apart, Audra. A total mess. She needed my emotional support. I paused, taking a breath. The sheer, unmitigated nerve of his words was stunning. Her mom and my dad are divorced, so I'm really the only family she has to rely on here. She needed me. I didn't want to bring you up or talk about what happened at the house because I knew it would just cause her more distress. I was trying to protect her feelings. Honestly, I figured you were strong enough to handle things on your own for a little while and wait for me to sort this out. He thought I was strong enough? He abandoned me during a medical crisis that could have killed me, during the loss of our child, and his excuse was that he assumed I could just handle it? The audacity was so profound it was almost impressive. I have to say, the text continued, the tone shifting from justification to accusation. I think you've seriously overreacted by flying all the way to your parents' place. That was a pretty dramatic and childish move. This is our home. You need to come back so we can talk about this like adults and work through it. I want you to come home. I finished reading and slowly lowered the phone. I looked up at my mom. Her face was a mask of cold, hard fury. That's not an apology, she said, her voice shaking with a rage that matched my own. That's an indictment. He is somehow blaming you for all of this. She was right. He wasn't sorry. He was angry. He was angry that my personal tragedy had inconvenienced him. He was angry that I had run to the safety of my family instead of sitting quietly in our dark, empty house and waiting patiently for him to decide when he was finished supporting Valerie. He saw the loss of our child not as our shared, heartbreaking tragedy, but as my hysterical drama. And Valerie's manufactured, second-hand trauma was somehow more valid, more urgent, more deserving of his immediate and undivided attention than my actual, physical, and emotional agony. He had looked at the two situations, side by side, his wife miscarrying their baby versus his stepsister being reminded of a bad memory, and had concluded that his stepsister's feelings were the bigger crisis. The grief that I had been drowning in for a week was suddenly, violently burned away. In its place was a white-hot rage. It was so pure, so clarifying, it felt like a splash of ice water to the face. There were no more tears left to cry for this man. He wasn't the man I had married. In fact, I didn't even know who he was. This person, this selfish, cowardly, cruel imposter who was trying to gaslight me from afar, he deserved nothing from me. Not my love, not my forgiveness, and certainly not my tears. All he deserved was the unvarnished, brutal truth. Can you believe that? Can you believe he actually sent that text to me? If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know you're here with me on this journey, and your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Just comment 1, and let me tell you what happened next. I didn't text him back. I wasn't going to get into a drawn-out, manipulative war of words over text message like a teenager. He didn't deserve the time it would take to compose a message. I stood up, walked out to my parents' back porch where I could be alone with the quiet evening air, and I called him. He picked up on the second ring, his voice wary, cautious. Audra? I got your text, I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. It was calm, cold, and unnervingly steady. It was the voice of a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Oh. Good, he said, and I could hear the hint of relief in his tone. He actually thought his pathetic excuse had worked. So you understand. That's great. When can you fly home? We need to talk. I let out a short, sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor at all. Come home? Greg, are you actually insane, or do you just think that I am? I'm not coming home. Not to you. What are you talking about? He stammered, the confidence in his voice faltering. We can work through this. I know it was a shock. You're just being overly emotional right now because of the loss. Overly emotional? I repeated, my voice rising, the cold calm cracking to reveal the molten rage beneath. You want to talk about overly emotional, Greg? Let me tell you something about being overly emotional. It's crying on the bathroom floor, holding the remains of our child in your hands, while begging your husband to come and help you. It's being told that you're making too much of a mess while you're hemorrhaging. It's being abandoned, ignored, and left to fend for yourself for an entire week while your husband plays therapist to his stepsister because she got the vapors. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I took a breath and pressed on, my words like shards of ice. When Valerie's own mother miscarried years ago, she had her own husband there to comfort her. I should have had mine. But my husband, my partner, my supposed protector, decided that I wasn't his priority. You committed medical neglect during a crisis, Greg. The doctor I saw here said I should have been in a hospital, that I could have died from blood loss or infection. You abandoned me. I did not abandon you, he protested, his voice weak and defensive. I told you, I had to help her. She has no one else. I'm all she has. And what about me, Greg? I shot back, my voice shaking with fury now. Who did I have? I was your wife. The miscarriage was happening to me, not her. The baby we lost was our baby. And you chose her. You made a conscious choice. You chose to comfort her over a memory while I was living a real-life nightmare. You chose her feelings over my physical safety. He was quiet for a long moment. I could hear his breathing, shaky and uncertain. He knew he had no defense. He knew he was caught. And then, he asked the most pathetic, wildly out-of-touch question I have ever heard in my life. So, are we still good? He asked, his voice pathetically small. The question was so absurd, so completely disconnected from the reality of the situation, that I almost laughed again. Good? Greg, no. We are not good. We will never be good again. What you did, it's not something you work through. It's not a fight over money or leaving the toilet seat up. It's unforgivable. I will never look at you the same way. I will never trust you again. You let me go through the worst, most terrifying moment of my life completely alone because you prioritized her delicate feelings over my life and the loss of our child. I took a deep breath, the finality of my next words settling in my soul like stones. I don't see how our relationship can possibly be repaired after this. It's broken. You broke it into a million pieces. Then, cornered and desperate, he said the words that confirmed everything. The words that blew the last vestiges of my denial and hope to smithereens, revealing the ugly, rotten truth underneath. You just don't get it, Audra, he said, his voice thick with a strange, infuriating mix of frustration and pity for me. You don't understand what. That was it. That was the confession, wrapped in an insult. It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of allegiance. You don't understand what Valerie and I mean to each other. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and poisonous, a confirmation of a truth I had been too afraid to even name. My rage evaporated, replaced by a chilling, absolute certainty. The emotional chaos inside me suddenly went still and quiet. Oh, I think I'm finally starting to, I said, my voice dangerously soft. This was never about her being triggered, was it, Greg? This wasn't about you comforting your poor, fragile stepsister. I don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly, his voice rising in panic. He was a bad liar. You're having an affair with her, aren't you? I asked, the question coming out as a flat statement of fact. Silence. A thick, damning, suffocating silence that was louder than any confession could ever be. Aren't you, Greg? I pushed, my voice as hard and sharp as a diamond. Tell me the truth. For once in your miserable, cowardly life, tell me the damn truth. I heard him take a shaky, ragged breath on the other end of the line. It's not like that, he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his own deceit. It's complicated. It's complicated is the coward's answer, I snapped, my patience gone. It's what cheaters say when they don't have the guts to own up to what they've done. It's a simple yes or no question, Greg. Are you sleeping with your stepsister? There was a long, agonizing pause. I could hear the sound of his world crumbling, the world of lies he had so carefully constructed. And then, a broken whisper that sealed his fate. Yes. Even though I knew it deep in my gut, hearing him say the word still felt like a physical punch. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. It was real. It was all real. The late-night calls, the constant texting, the box of memories, him defending her at every turn, him abandoning me on the bathroom floor, it all clicked into place with a sickening finality. It wasn't a series of bizarre, selfish choices. It was a pattern. It was the calculated behavior of a man protecting his affair at all costs. My miscarriage hadn't been an inconvenience to their inappropriate sibling bond. It had been an inconvenience to their sordid little romance. He hadn't left me to comfort his distraught stepsister. He had left me to be with his lover. The thought was so vile, so profoundly sick and twisted, that I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How long? I asked, my voice hollow, detached. I was an investigator now, gathering facts. A few months, he admitted, his voice barely audible. It started about a month after you got pregnant. It happened. It didn't just happen, Greg, I said, the cold, hard resolve solidifying in my chest. You made a choice. Every single day for months, you chose to lie to my face. You chose to betray the vows we made. And on the worst day of my life, you chose her over me and our dead child. You chose your affair over your family. I thought about the future we had planned. The savings account for a down payment. The discussions about the inheritance my parents had planned to leave us, and how we'd use part of it for a college fund for our kids. All of it was a fantasy, built on a foundation of his lies. Now, all I could see was a future of legal fees, of fighting over assets, of the ugly, messy business of divorce. I'm going to need to hire a lawyer, I said, the word feeling foreign and sharp in my mouth. This is over. Audra, no, please, he started to sob now, pathetic, self-pitying sobs that did nothing to move me. We can fix this. I'll end it with her. I swear. I love you. No, you don't, I said, the last flicker of any feeling I had for him, love, pity, anything, extinguishing completely. You don't even know what love is. You are a poison I have to cut out of my life. I took a final, steadying breath. I miss my baby, and I miss the marriage I thought I had, I told him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They both died on the same day. But at least now, I know who the killer was. I could hear him begging, pleading on the other end, but I was done. I had heard everything I needed to hear. Without another word, I ended the call. The moment I hung up the phone, I opened my contacts and blocked his number. Then I went to my social media, my fingers moving with a decisive, surgical precision. I blocked him. I blocked Valerie. I blocked his mother, his father, his cousins, anyone and everyone who connected me to his toxic world. It was a digital amputation. A clean, necessary cut to stop the infection from spreading. I walked back inside, my legs feeling steadier than they had in over a week. My parents looked up from the TV, their faces etched with worry, reading the verdict on my face. He admitted it, I said, my voice clear and strong. He's been having an affair with her. It's been going on for months. My dad let out a string of curse words that was both shocking and deeply satisfying to hear. My mom didn't say anything. She just came over and wrapped me in a fierce, protective hug. Good, she whispered into my hair, her voice trembling with a fury that mirrored my own. Good. Now we know what we're dealing with. Now we fight. And we did. The very next day, my dad, who worked in finance and knew people everywhere, made some calls. By that afternoon, I had an appointment with the best divorce lawyer in the state. She was a shark in a designer suit, a no-nonsense woman named Catherine who listened to my entire story without interruption, her expression growing colder and harder with each detail. When I finished, she looked me in the eye and said, with a confidence that was incredibly reassuring, "Audra, what he did is not just grounds for divorce, it's monstrous. We are going to make sure you get everything you are entitled to, and then some." The feeling of having someone so competent and powerful on my side was an incredible relief. Greg tried to contact me, of course. He left rambling, tearful voicemails from blocked numbers that I deleted without listening to. He sent long, pleading emails, which I forwarded directly to Catherine without reading. At one point, about a week later, he had the unmitigated gall to call my parents' house landline. My dad answered. I was in the other room, but I heard his voice, low and dangerous. I don't know exactly what was said, but the conversation was very short. It involved my dad shouting the phrase "you pathetic excuse for a man," and Greg never called the house again. A few weeks after that, a mutual friend, with a hesitant "Are you sure you want to see this?" text, sent me a screenshot. It was from Valerie's Instagram page. She had posted a picture of her and Greg, sitting at an outdoor cafe, smiling into the camera. He had his arm around her. The caption read, "Sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places. So happy to finally be with my soulmate." I looked at the picture, at their smiling, triumphant faces, and I felt nothing. Not a pang of jealousy, not a stab of pain. It was just pathetic. They were broadcasting their sordid, home-wrecking affair like some grand, sweeping romance, completely oblivious to the wreckage and the trauma they had left in their wake. It's been 6 months now. The divorce was finalized last week. He didn't fight it much. Catherine made it very clear that if he tried, she would be more than happy to bring up the details of his medical and emotional neglect in open court. I got the house, which I promptly put on the market and sold to the first decent offer. I couldn't stand to spend one more night in a place that held so many ghosts. I used the money from the sale to put a down payment on a small, sunny condo in a new city, 3 states away. It's a place where no one knows my story, where I am not the woman whose husband left her. I'm just Audra. I'm starting over. It's not easy. It's a slow, quiet, one day at a time process. There are days when the grief is still a heavy weight in my chest. I'll see a pregnant woman at the grocery store or a new dad pushing a stroller in the park, and the wound feels fresh all over again. I don't think that will ever fully go away, and maybe it shouldn't. It's a scar, a part of my story now. But I'm healing. I have a new, less stressful job at a local library. I'm making new friends. I'm rediscovering who Audra is, on her own. And I'm finding out that she's stronger, more resilient, and more capable than I ever gave her credit for. She had to be. They can have each other. They deserve the shallow, selfish love they built on my pain. They can live in their little bubble of betrayal and call it a love story. But me? I have my future. A future that is quiet and peaceful and entirely my own. And for the first time in a very long time, that feels like more than enough. It feels like peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've been through anything like this, or just want to share your thoughts, please leave a comment below. It really does help to know you're not alone. Please, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.